There we go. All right, I have 6 p.m. It is Thursday, April 6th, 2023, 6 p.m. So I'm going to call this meeting to order and get us started. Quick introduction. My name is Carl Granrath. I'm the hearing examiner for tonight's hearings. The purpose of tonight's hearings is for me to gather evidence and testimony on the matters that are pending. And from tonight's record that's created, along with everything else that's been submitted, that'll become part of the official record. And from that record, I will write my recommendation that I submit to city staff within 2 weeks of tonight's hearing. And that recommendation goes to your county commissioners, who ultimately have the authority to make the decision for these applications. So I see I've got some comment sheets filled out. If anyone else comes or wishes to speak, or anyone who's on Zoom who may be connected, there will be an opportunity for you to give public testimony. I will let you know when it is appropriate to do so. There's a 5-minute limit for members of the public to give testimony. The applicant has 30 minutes for their presentation, and then if there is public testimony, an opportunity for rebuttal up to 15 minutes to address any questions or concerns that came up during the public comment period or from staff. So with that, I think I'll just get us started. We do have 2 hearings tonight, and first up, I do have variance 22-0004, Sappington variance. Mr. Finkel for the staff will present the application, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. As you stated, this is a request by Sappington Living Trust. There's also a couple other individuals that were mentioned in the staff report. Miss Cynthia Kinley Mr. and Mrs. Kinley, as well as Cynthia Whitlock. And the reason I want to make sure that all 3 individuals are stated into the record is because this is a unique situation. This is a request for a variance. Do you mind?
Who are those first names you just said?
So we have Cynthia Whitlock and Mr. and Mrs. Kinley. And the reason I'd like to state those individuals into the record, because this is a unique situation. I'll go into the details, but in general, the applicants are requesting a variance to their rear and side yard setback requirements in the agricultural suburban zone. The subject property is located north of Highway 53 and in between Hauser and City of Rathdrum. The subject property is 1.5 acres in size, and it is zoned agricultural suburban. We also have the prescribed setbacks for accessory structures on the property, being that the request is to retain the RV/carport in its current location. The rear yard and side yard setbacks for which the applicant is seeking a deviation to are listed on the screen. The rear yard setback is 15 feet and the side yard setback is 10 feet for the structure that's in question. The reason I introduced 3 different individuals into the record is because of the uniqueness of the request. The subject property is 1.5 acres in size. However, the area for which their request is being is currently being part of the review, or the subject of this review process, is a portion of that property, which is roughly 50%, as you can see, the highlighted area, and that's the exclusive access easement area that's benefiting Mr. Sappington. He resides to the north of the subject property in this location. This is where his residence is, but he does have legal right to this exclusive easement area that is part of the Kinley property on which the request is being made. This is a very unique situation. I may have seen only once or twice where somebody is constructing or requesting a project on a parcel that they don't own, but they have an exclusive use easement. Typically, we're dealing with utility or access easements, but in this case, it's an exclusive use easement. And so that all 3 individuals had to be part of this application request. And we do have a notarized authorization from the underlying property owners as well as Sappington and Ms. Whitlock to be represented by their legal counsel, Brian Bean, who will be presenting after me tonight. The applicant is seeking the two variances to retain the carport and RV and carport in this location. This is the topography or the topographic map of the area within the exclusive exclusive use easement. This is a close-up site plan of the location where the structure is currently located. It's located approximately 7 feet 10 inches from the side yard setback, and the applicant is seeking a 2'2" variance to the 10-foot side yard setback. And on the top or on the north side of the structure, it is located 1.4 feet from the property line, and they're seeking a variance of 13'8". I'd like to bring to your attention that there's been quite a history on this project. It started back in, I believe, September of 2020 with one of our staff planners, where they were reviewing the site plan for a building permit, and at the time it was discovered that the placement of the structure in this location would be in violation of the prescribed setbacks that I just stated. We advised the applicant that we could not process the application unless they either moved the structure or requested a variance to the prescribed setbacks, and if it were approved, then the application could move forward for the building permit. The applicant did advise us on the record, and it's part of the file, I'm sure you have a copy of that and you read it, that unfortunately because of a medical condition of one of their family members, they had to have the structure in place in order to have the RV stored underneath it, and they could not wait to go through the review process. And moreover, they had stated that there was no other area on this property to move the structure so that it met the prescribed setbacks. Moving forward, we know that the applicant did place the structure in the current location, and after a couple attempts, we initially issued a courtesy code violation for the placement of the structure without an approved permit and within the prescribed setbacks. And then ultimately we issued and recorded a code violation. And I believe the code violation was recorded in fall of 2021. I know that the applicant had requested or had submitted an application for a variance after the fact, but in the meantime there was a significant amount or a lot of communication back and forth between a number of planners in our office, including myself, and unfortunately there has been a lot of miscommunication, and that was only addressed later on when we were conducting a site visit and actually working on the variance itself and conducting our investigation over the physical features of the property and then undue hardship that the applicant has been claiming since he made the initial attempt to submit a building permit application. These are some of the photos of the property in question or the area of the exclusive use easement. Myself and a code enforcement officer, Craig Davidson, had conducted a site inspection in February of this year. And up until that point, unfortunately, we didn't know that, or we didn't realize, to be more clear, that there were significant there were significant physical features on site like steep slopes and rock outcroppings that prevented the applicant from being able to move the structure to different location. In the top left photo, you can see this is going up the hill to the exclusive use area, and the photo on the right shows looking from the top, from actually Mr. Sappington's property that's north of this area, looking down at the exclusive use area. And there's a couple more photos near the RV carport structure, as well as, I believe, looking down on the access driveway. The photo in the middle actually shows us measuring the distance. This was, we stringlined the property line, and this is the closest point on the rear of the property, which is 1 foot 4 inches from the north property line of the exclusive use easement area. I actually do have a video that I'd like to show that we took while we conducted a site visit, just to give a sort of an overview of the existing physical features on the property. This is myself walking up the hill where Mr. Sappington gains access to his property, as well as the location of the RV carport structure. As you can see, this is very steep, and as we get to the top of the hill, there's a bench, and the question will likely be raised: why is it that the applicant cannot move the structure to the east side of the common driveway, where there's a relatively flat area or a meadow? And the reason for that is that there's an existing drain field that is adjacent to the common driveway that serves Mr. Sappington's property or residence north of this area. And based on our site visit, we concluded that it'd be very difficult to relocate the structure to the other side of the common driveway, and I explain in greater detail as I get to staff analysis. But during the, and unfortunately I have these wrongfully labeled, but the agency comments that we received, really there was no significant concerns from the Building Division, Northern Lakes Fire District, Panhandle Health District, or the Post Falls Highway District. We do have an existing code violation which can be and needs to be remediated if the variance is approved, with the applicant complying with the Kootenai County Building Division requirements, and they have a list of those requirements that are included as part of the staff report. During the public comment period, we received only one comment in support of the application. So just to clarify, when we conducted a site visit, we did conclude that there was a steep terrain with rock outcroppings on the majority of the exclusive access easement area benefiting Mr. Sappington, and the only relatively flat area was the area where the a drain field was currently located. We concluded that by relocating the RV carport storage area to the east side of the common driveway where the drain field was, would require the relocation of the drain field entirely, because you couldn't have a structure sit over the top of the drain field, because it would compromise its ability to function as a treatment facility or a treatment of wastewater discharge. We also concluded that another location on site would be likely cost prohibitive because of the amount of disturbance that the applicant would have to make, and we concluded that if there were any disturbance in any area elsewhere within this easement, it would require a significant amount of blasting because of all the basalt that's on the property. But technically, the only area that they could build would be in this area, and they couldn't traverse across the drain field, so it would require that the drain field be further relocated east, and then the carport would have to be moved to this location. However, they would still have to maintain a 15-foot rear yard setback, which would push them further south, and then it would, we don't know how that would play out. And we don't believe that having the applicant relocate a drain field to move the RV carport is reasonable from, you know, just from a financial standpoint. It seems like to be not just only a physical hardship, but it just seems to be too comprehensive to have to do that. We have the required findings listed here, and they're part of the staff report. But basically, the key points to approving a variance is there an undue hardship that exists because of the characteristics of the site, being that the site is has irregular shape, has limited area for development, or has steep slopes. We believe at least two of those can be met with steep slopes and limited space for development. The other question is whether or not this is a self-imposed hardship. One could argue that placing a structure without a building permit is a self-imposed hardship, but at this point we believe that because of the necessity that the applicant argued early on, and the fact that the physical characteristics of the site prevent them from being able to place it elsewhere on the property, I guess that's a determination that would have to be made by you. I think it's a discretionary measure to see whether if this was self-imposed or not, but it could be argued either way. And the last points are whether or not this would be detrimental to the adjoining neighbors. We don't believe that to be the case, and whether that would cause any social or economic impact to the community. We don't believe that to be the case either. So this is a bit unique, but I think we believe that if the variance is approved and the applicant is able to comply with all the building code requirements, we are confident that we could remove the code violation, and then the applicant would be in compliance with all the setback as well as other requirements of the land use and development code. I stand for any questions that you have for me at this time.
All right, thanks for your presentation. I do have a few questions, maybe more in general first, and then we can maybe get to some particulars of this case. So there aren't limits to the number of accessory structures a property can have, are there?
No. As long as you don't exceed the threshold for coverage of impervious surface. There is a threshold there is a limit as to number of, I believe, cargo containers that you could have on the property, or the number of structures that you could have without first establishing a primary use. But in this case, the use has been established by the underlying property owner, Mr. and Mrs. Kinley, and being that the exclusive use easement is benefiting Mr. Sappington, we don't believe there's a requirement to have him establish a primary use within that exclusive easement. It's just on the property itself.
Okay. No, there's maybe some stuff we might not get clear answers on, but so this is an accessory structure. It's going to be owned by one property owner in the easement area of another person's property.
Correct.
So it'll be an accessory structure to the applicant's property, or would it be considered an accessory structure to? Again, maybe splitting hairs here because there is no limit on the number of accessory structures a parcel could have, but perhaps affecting lot coverage.
It would be an accessory structure to the underlying parcel, but the ownership and use of it would be legally benefiting Mr. Sappington. And I think that's a good question, but if you'd like a more detailed response, I would defer to Mr. Sappington's legal counsel, Brian Bean, and he can further elaborate. But I don't think from a land use standpoint, it matters to staff whether the use and benefit of an accessory living structure belongs to one or the other individual. We're merely looking at it from a land use standpoint, compatibility, and from a compatibility standpoint, that we have a primary use established and that the accessory structures at that point, the number of them is really irrelevant as long as they meet all the setback requirements and don't exceed the impervious surface coverage requirements in the underlying zone.
Okay, so, and I think, kind of jumping back in between specifics, I think I did see that there was an existing pad, and maybe the applicant will be able to give me a more definitive answer on this when it's their turn for their presentation and questioning. But I guess that goes along with my question of whether or not there was an analysis done of there being maybe a more appropriate place for this on their main parcel, and
That's
how that
a
may
really
affect
good question. And that's a really good question. So the first part of your question is, does the existing pad for the structure play a role into this? Perhaps it does, but as you know, if you have a pad that doesn't protrude above grade or is just a gravel pad, there's really no setback requirement. It's when you actually place a structure on it that it then requires that it meets the setbacks or a variance is granted. The other question that you raised is, we raised it early on with Mr. Sappington and his legal counsel, that why is it that this specific area had to be utilized rather than Mr. Sappington's property, because he has a large parcel of land. I believe it's 10 acres in size. And if you visit the property, you've seen what it looks like. I believe that the actual pad for his mobile or for his house was carved out of a hillside as well. There's really no room to build there because it's all hillside and it's all rock outcroppings. Really, the only area that he could place it is within the driveway, but then he would not be able to access his garage. I believe there's a garage right behind the his residence, and he can further elaborate on that. But we did explore that option, and it was unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it was a rude awakening to us when we visited the site that it had such significant slopes, and he could build it on his property, but he would have to do significant amount of blasting in order to create a pad. Even the location of the RV itself, if you look at the photos, they did have to. I don't know if I have the photo, but they did have to level the gravel pad because it takes it slopes downhill from there. So they did have to do some fill to have a more of a flatter area for the RV carport where it's at. But like I said, the only way that this would be feasible is they would have to physically remove the drain field, and they would have to move it further east to a different location, and then come in and move the structure. But then it would have to be located further south so that it met the 15-foot setback requirement. And at this point, we think this is such an insignificant. The structure itself, it's not a residence, it's not a habitable structure, it's not even a garage. It's just an prefabricated RV cover for his RV that we believe that this is an insignificant impact to the community. But you're welcome to ask Mr. Sappington or his legal counsel for additional information if you'd like.
Great, thank you very much. I reserve the right to call you back up, though. So, Mr. Callahan, sir.
Mr. Graham Rath, David Callahan, Community Development Director. I would be so bold as to say this situation is unique. In all of my 43 years, I haven't seen this exact set of circumstances. So searching for the explanation of accessory to what is frankly a distinction without a usefulness. I think the staff's really drilled down on the important point, which is there's a hardship, it's not self-imposed, we're comfortable with the variance.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I believe we have the applicant's representative here to provide a presentation in favor of the application. Brian Bean.
Good evening, sir. I've got a PowerPoint that we're going to go over tonight. I've also got a printout of it that I'd like to enter into the record that might be a little bit easier for you to follow along. So I'll present that to you.
Please and thank you.
Entered into the record as HE 1001.
So again, my name is Brian Bean. I'm an attorney here at Coeur d'Alene, and I am counsel for the Sappington Living Trust. I think the word tonight that I've heard a couple times is that the property is unique, and it really is. And so I think as you'll see through my presentation, and I'll try to make it quick because it's somewhat redundant to Mr. Finkel's, but it's a puzzle piece, and it makes it really challenging to do much of anything on it. So again, this is the variance application case number VAR 22-0044. I'm going to just go over some general overview information on page 2 for the record. So again, the applicant is Sappington Living Trust. I'll refer to them as Sappington going forward. Property address 11725 North Sunrise Court. Now that is the adjacent property. That is owned by the Kinleys directly below the Sappington. So throughout this, I will refer to the residence property, which is the Sappingtons, and then I'll refer to the Kinleys property, which is where the actual improvement is located. This, as Mr. Finkel noted, is rural suburban, which means it's very low density. The closest neighboring improvement is approximately 6 feet away. The second one is 275 feet away. So that's quite a distance. The improvement in question is a 20 by 30 unenclosed metal carport and is placed on top of a concrete pad, and it also has utilities installed to it. These were
It's a compact gravel pad.
oh, I apologize. So it's compact gravel, and that was installed prior to the Sappingtons moving into that, which I think plays in a little bit to how it came to be that they had utilities there, and when they looked for a good site, that was the obvious one for them. So tonight they're seeking 2 variances, one for the side setback, which is prescribed to be 10 feet. They need a 2-foot by 2-inch variance for that side setback. And then the other one, which is more unique, is the rear setback, and that is a prescribed 15-foot setback for accessory improvements such as this. That rear setback, I will note, is it's a setback to their own property line, since the carport is located on somebody else's property. As far as, and I'm just thinking about it, as far as ownership, you had asked Mr. Finkel about that. I guess the best way I can describe it is that an easement is a property right. And so they're having been granted an easement by the Kinleys is akin to being granted an ownership right. So that's their right to use that property. And it's an exclusive use easement, not even an access. So it's a use easement, which just goes farther. They can do what they want over, above, and across. And the improvement itself is something that they own as well. Any questions there?
No, just to make clear, I believe I did see the county attorney chimed in, opining that it was okay for the structure to go up, and given the easement language. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Am I doing something wrong with this?
There you go. So there it is. You already saw it in Mr. Finkel's presentation, but I just wanted to put a quick slide in here. I've got a bunch of pictures in here for you tonight. That is the unenclosed carport. You can see that behind it, there's a large retaining wall. So whoever installed this did have to do considerable work and dig it down about anywhere from 5 to 8 to 10 feet. I might go on to slide 2. Now this is the site plan. Just want to again orient you. So you see the residence property at the top. That's where the Sappingtons live. You see the carport located on the adjacent property, and you see the rear, and you see the rear setback, and you see the side setback. So again, the rear setback is we're asking for a significant variance of 13.6 13 feet and 6 inches, but again, it is from their own property line. And when you might ask, well, what if it breaks hands or if it sells, this exclusive use easement, which goes all the way down to the driveway, it runs with the land. So it's subordinate to the land, which means it will transfer with any sale, and then anybody else will get the benefit of that. Going on to slide 5, flat. Okay, here's the fun stuff. So what is the legal standard? This is in the Kootenai County Ordinance Code. This expands on the Idaho Code, actually. So Idaho Code is just elements 2 and 3. Kootenai County adds in the first element, which is the ensuring that the applicable procedural requirements have been met. I'm going to go through each of these. The second one is an undue hardship exists because of characteristics of the site. And then the third one is the variance will not be in conflict with the public interest. Slide 6. I think it's important to discuss the purpose. What is the purpose of a variance? It says it in Kootenai County Ordinance 493. The purpose of this section is to authorize such variances from the provisions of this title in specific cases as will not be contrary to the public interest where, owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this title would result in an unnecessary hardship. So it's just saying that the title here was the planning and oh gosh, I think it's the Title 8 planning and development title. And so it's saying where there's setbacks, we're looking for, hey, does a variance make sense? Because if you apply the literal enforcement of it, it may cause an undue hardship. So setbacks, excuse me, thank you. Case law, I'm sure you deal with setbacks all the time, Mr. Hearing Examiner, but I wanted to point out that there is case law precedent. Kootenai County hearing examiners have determined on at least one prior occasion that an undue hardship would result from a literal enforcement of a setback requirement. And that was pursuant Worley versus Kootenai County back in 2009. Yes, sir. Okay, element 1, procedural requirements. I'm going to look at the county a little bit to say, have we done everything that you wanted us to do? Because in my belief, we have. And I think that it really just comes down to have we submitted everything that you want, and that being the application and all the components of the application. We can go through the procedural history as well, but that's more just the history of how we got here today. And we know we've been, all of us have been at this for a couple of years now, and I appreciate everybody's patience and working with us to get you the information, and I appreciate Mr. Finkel's willingness to keep coming back at this and hearing us out and ultimately coming out and looking at the property. So if you have any questions concerning the procedural requirements, I'm happy to address them without witness move on. Thank you, sir. Element number 2, undue hardship due to the site characteristics. As you saw, this is a very unique site, and there's a lot of things that stand out. But the site characteristics that would cause an undue hardship if the literal intent of the setbacks is enforced, in our opinion, is number 1, puzzle-shaped property lines, the new setbacks that would be violated, the septic tank and drain field, the curvature of the driveway, the steep terrain, and the rocky and significant rock outcrops. So taking first the first site characteristics that I brought up, this one is perhaps the most severe to me in a lot of ways, is that it really is. It's got the head of a puzzle piece, and it fits into the Kinley's property. At one point, this was actually inversed, and they must have done a, prior to the Sappingtons owning it, they must have done some form of lot line adjustment, and then that puzzle piece came down into McKinley's property. As a result, I mean, the intent of setbacks is to create space. It's to create a buffer, to allow for air and light, and it works very well in perfectly platted new neighborhoods. But when we take a piece of property like this, it makes it really challenging. You can see where they put the carport, and the house. You're contending with not a true rear setback. I mean, the side is pretty darn close. Good. Slide 2. Now this goes a little bit deeper into what I'm talking about with what happens with the impact of a puzzle piece of property like this. This was taken from Casey Earth, the GIS map. It's not perfect. I did all these dotted lines and did my best to map it out, but the GIS map is pretty good where it allows you to measure by feet. So you can see where you've got the drain field, and yes, the drain field is an issue. You got lines leading all the way through here, so the drain field lines would have to be dug up. The road would have to be dug up. Drain field as well. But all of that, even if you got that done, would be for naught, because this is where the 15-foot rear setback extends out to. And when you go right about here, you start getting into a 44% grade, as we'll see on the topography map. So that's the effect of it. Now, the other question that's come up is, why did they not just build somewhere else? They've got a lot of acres. Well, you would violate the setbacks right here. It also would make it very challenging getting a large mobile home around here. But the bigger piece of it, though, is that there isn't access up and above the garage to the property. So everything, and maybe I've got a better picture, but everything that could have been built on has been built on. And then to get back to the 10 acres, it's pretty rural and rocky, and to date, there's no access back there. Thanks, sir. This is just another, moving on to the other site characteristics. We just touched on the puzzle piece type property. We touched on the setbacks that would be violated as well, and now the curvature of the driveway. The driveway is narrow, and I didn't appreciate it. I think, like Vlad, when I went up there, I didn't appreciate the true difficulty getting up there. So I was in a 4x4 truck. It was January, February, and it was challenging to get up this road. This road is narrow, it's icy, it's steep. I point that out because what you see on the screen right here is just a small little camper, I believe, from previous satellite images. But the motorhome that they have, my guess is they had to drive it up here and then they back it up. But it makes it really challenging to get much of anything up there, and I had challenges getting down from there. The next site characteristic that I'm going to go into is just the rockiness, the sheer rockiness of this property. It's tough from the satellite images to appreciate it, but you can see you got these little circles, these little mounds. They're rocks sticking out of the ground, probably 2 or 3 or 4 feet high, maybe even. And then you've got this just drop off right here. It's sort of like going up Cherry Hill here in Coeur d'Alene, and you get these huge rocks just looming over the property. So that gives you an idea. I'm going on the This goes into the steepness. For slide 12 is the topography survey. We had initially, when we submitted the first application in July 2022, the county requested that we do a topography survey to get a rating on the steepness. And this gives you a little bit better idea. So when you approach the property, you're at a 44% grade, and then over here you're at 49%. I had to Google, and I Googled, is 44% steep initially? And then Google came back and said it's very, very steep. And so then I went going out there, yes, of course, and Google was correct. It's very steep. So that topography survey gives you an idea of why you can't utilize much more of this property, and that's most likely why the neighbors were willing to grant that exclusive use easement, in that nobody else can really benefit from this. I should point out too, before I forget, that Mr. Sappington told me that this has become quite the game trail, and we did discuss that with Mr. Finkel, but they enjoy watching deer and bobcats and all types of things go through that flatter section. Go on to slide 13, slide. That's just a close up, but this is a nice big close up for you to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So we've got the rear setback again from their own residence property. It's just 1.1 foot and 4 inches away. We've got the side setback. This is 7.9. We're asking for a larger 2 foot by 2 inch setback. I think there was some approximation in there. We'll leave a little bit larger variance is what we're requesting. You can see that the survey did show some of the rock outcroppings, trees, etc. Any questions there before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. Slide 14. The next slide is 14 through, I think, 20 are just pictures. Yeah, go ahead. Vlad already showed you some of these.
And I did have a chance to visit the site today. So,
Okay,
yes.
good. That's great. Hopefully it wasn't as snowy or icy as
It was not.
Element 3, public interest. So the first part of this element is will the adjacent property be adversely affected? You can look at this a couple different ways. So, they are, the carport is located on an adjacent property, on their neighbor's property. It's still 206 feet away from their improvement. It's well above that neighbor's own improvement. I don't think that they would ever have any reason to go up the driveway. The driveway is a dead end. Again, this is why they were willing to do the exclusive use easement, is my assumption. The next property owner to the west is a true adjacent neighbor to this carport, and they are 275 feet away from the carport. So the point being that will the adjacent neighbors be impacted by this? No. The second subpart of element 3 is it going to change the nature of the suburban or the rural suburban zoning? And the answer there again is no. This is by its own definition, it's rural. It's not going to be seen by anybody else. It's up in the woods. And then I think the other piece of it is a carport unusual in this zone? It's not. It's very, very common. And it was a good source of shelter, and still is for my client's motorhome. And the reason why, going back, is that they really needed the shelter because somebody was in that motorhome and they were disabled and they needed the shelter from the snow. So that was able to, or permitted them to more effectively utilize it. The last subpart is, will it adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the county? There again, I would argue no. I don't think it's going to have any impact. I don't think that anybody has any reason to go up that dead-end private driveway. Nobody can. It's virtually you can't see it. So I think that element 3 is met as well. I will rest there and answer any questions you have, Mr.
No, thank you for your thorough presentation, and thank you for addressing some of the questions I brought up with Mr. Finkel. I do believe I have all the information I need. So unless there's, I guess we should double check and see if there's members of the public, maybe anyone who's joined us, or anyone who's on Zoom who wishes to give comment.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, it's only staff on Zoom.
Okay. Well, I have no more questions for you, sir. So if there's no members of the public here that are going to give public comment, then I think that will do it tonight for your hearing.
Thank you for your time and thank you, Mr. Finkel.
All right, thank you. With that, 6:45 p.m., I'm going to close the public hearing for variance 22-0004 Sappington variance. All right, thank you all. And with that, we're going to move to our next hearing. 6:45 p.m., I'm going to open the public hearing for CUP 22-0021, the Remington Reservoir.
Good evening, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Amy Hillen, planner for Kootenai County, for the record. I'm just going to make sure this is working here. All right, Vlad, do you mind driving again? Sure. Well, while he's going through that, just going to briefly introduce the case. There are representatives from Welsh Colmer here on behalf of Remington Water District who have prepared a presentation. So we refer to this as the Remington Reservoir, but it is essentially an upgrade to an existing public utility complex facility. Still not working. Might be a battery issue.
Can you use the mouse to that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. The facility is located on Shoshone Avenue. It's east of the city of Athol. It's approximately a quarter mile west of the intersection between Shoshone Avenue and Caribou Avenue. The parcel is located in the rural zone. And it's in the country land use designation for the comprehensive plan. The proposal is to upgrade the existing facility not only to be in compliance with the Department of Environmental Quality, but also to provide storage capacity for existing and new connections. What is there today as a public utility complex? There's a well that was drilled in 1998, a booster station, which is housed in a structure on site that you'll see in the photos. That was built in 1995, and the 100,000-gallon reservoir constructed in 1995 as well. What is needed for improvements is a 160,000-gallon cast-in-place concrete reservoir, overflow piping, 2 additional booster pumps that will be in the existing building, and then, of course, any connections to the existing system. From the area, you can get an idea of what's there today and what they're going to be adding. So the new reservoir will be in the southern portion of the property. And you can kind of see the interconnectivity of the water lines and the new wells that will be needed. There's also an overhead power line, which is important to know for my later slides. And just giving you an idea of where it's going to sit on the ground, it's really mostly going to be underground, the reservoir. It's going to match pretty close to the existing reservoir and only be about 2 feet above ground level. And from the photos, you can see that here. You can see the existing structure, that's green, that's where the booster station is, and then you can barely see the reservoir as it is today. And then there's those power lines there. So when we did agency review, the building division had their usual requirements, just need a building permit. They did submit a building permit actually and has already been approved by our building division, just hasn't been issued. Lakes Highway District had no objection. Panhandle Health District said all their permits have been approved, obtained and approved. Timberlake Fire Protection District approved. Department of Water Resources said they had all of their necessary permits, and they just wanted a certificate of completion when it's finished. The sheriff, who were required to notify of any CUPs, also approved it. And I just thought it was important to put a quote directly from the Department of Environmental Quality, just emphasizing the need to bring it up to their requirements and to meet IDAPA. After I submitted the staff report, Kootenai Electric Cooperative did provide this last-minute comment. It has to do with the setbacks from their power lines. Based on the site plan, it does appear that the reservoir will be at an appropriate distance away. And when I contacted Welsh Comer, they spoke with Kootenai Electric, and they stated that they will mark those setbacks to ensure they're met during construction. And we did not receive any public comment for this proposal. For our staff analysis, there are performance standards specifically for a public utility complex facility. We find that they meet all of these requirements. One of them is lot coverage. They do not exceed the 35% of total lot area. The impact on neighboring properties is fairly minimal. In the narrative, the applicant emphasizes that the current impact will not change. If anything, will be very minimal. The booster stations are in an existing structure to help with noise, and really any generators will be used for testing or emergency only. No additional lighting, air emissions, solid waste, and the CUP application was actually required per Kootenai County Code 85121. Item E, because they are going to make significant improvements. The fence will be expanded. It will look just how it is today, a screened fence. Existing vegetation will remain undisturbed, and any disturbed areas during construction will be revegetated. It's an unmanned facility, but we will ask that for maintenance personnel that they do have a designated parking spot. And they did submit a site disturbance permit for this project as well. So that will continue its review once this is approved. In addition to the findings that a hearing body will have to make just for a general CUP, the public utility complex facility has these additional items that we need to also make findings for. Just the convenience and necessity of the facility, any adverse effects, and of course any reasonable restrictions or conditions of approval or anything like that that might need to be mitigated. And I stand for any questions you have.
I have no questions for you, Ms. Owen. Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
All right, so I'm not sure who wants to go first, but I do have on the top of my stack here Ashley Williams as the applicant's representative. All right, come on up with Ms. Williams.
All right, I need to grab that mouse for a second so I can bring up your presentation. Thank you.
So while she's doing that, my name's Ashley Williams with Welch Comer Engineers. We are the district engineers for Remington, so we'll be representing them tonight. We'll have just a short presentation, hopefully supplement what Amy already put together. So. Okay. So this again is for CUP 22-0021. Maybe. Oh, there we go. So the existing reservoir, actually, I think we have 1991, 1995, pretty close there. The system is currently deficient in water storage capacity per the Idaho rules for public drinking water systems, IDAPA 58.01.08. The completed reservoir is part of several capital improvements that the district's doing to serve their current customers as well as potential future growth. So a little bit of the system itself, pretty large area south of Highway 54. You can see kind of the distribution lines in different colors there, with the main facility shown for their well. They do actually have another well right across the street from this facility, the 100,000 gallon reservoir, and then the booster station as well. So we have some good pictures. Sorry, this is a little finicky. Here we go. You can kind of see the top of that existing reservoir. This is actually just behind the reservoir to the east, and showing those power lines as well. Oops. So just kind of a little bit of math. The current storage reservoir trying to serve the existing equivalent dwelling units that are served by Remington. There's a requirement of 571 gallons. That's based on several requirements of DEQ. Obviously, we don't have that much to provide for the existing customers. And so with adding the 160,000 gallon storage to that, then we're able to meet both the current needs as well as some additional growth in the system. And we'll go real quick. We did talk about 661 connections in the staff report. That's with a future phase of some pump replacements that would add more capacity to that. So if you had a question on that, but with the storage and the pumps that we're currently planning inside the booster station, that's the capacity we'll be able to meet. So as I said, the reservoir is part of several other improvements. So we have the partially buried reservoir, new booster pumps that are going inside the building. We did drill well number 3 on that site as well, and then completed a transmission upgrade as well. So, and have a pretty good overview of the site there and kind of a graphic of where the reservoir will go. And you've already seen the site plan there. And with the overhead power lines, we will indicate the setbacks. We do have a contractor already under contract to do the project, and there's adequate room there, I think, for them to get their concrete truck in and out to construct it. Did have a couple examples just in case. It will look a lot like the existing one, but we have a couple other projects we've done where with partially buried reservoirs, so you can kind of see what that looks like in different scenarios. And that's all I have. Any questions?
I have no questions for you either. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Williams. I do have also the potential for Lydie Austin of Welchcomer to... Liddy, sorry. Okay. All right, Mr. Callahan, are there any eager members of the public here to or online ready for their testimony?
No, Mr. Graham, going with the staff.
Okay, I have no further questions for staff or the applicant. So thank you both for your work and thorough presentations. With that, at 6:58 p.m., I'm going to close the public hearing for CUP 22-0021. I will have my recommendation submitted to county staff within 2 weeks. So thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience in our first application tonight, and have a good evening.
Goodbye.
Still my favorite part.